My
Guys,
name is
Crypto
Dean.
with Dinny here today on the podcast. A great guest. I've got Andrew Howard from Bitcoin Reserve. Andrew, you're very welcome, man.
Thank you, Denny. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about all these points with you, and very nice to meet you.
I'm looking forward to it. We should have recorded the pre-podcast chat because you dropped some bombs there, man. So I'm looking forward to this. I suppose before we go on, let's just tell us about yourself, man. Tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, so I'm from Los Angeles. I've been living in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for the last 2 years, approximately, since the whole global panic happened. Um, and I have a military background. I first learned about Bitcoin when I was in the military, which really changed a lot for me, learning about our central banking system and being in the U.S. military at the time. And now I work full time in Bitcoin. I have been doing so for the last couple of years. I'm Chief Business Development Officer of a Bitcoin brokerage called Bitcoin Reserve. So if you just think Federal Reserve and then replace federal with Bitcoin, that's our company. And yeah, life is pretty great. I just get to write articles about this thing, go on podcasts, talk to people like yourself. We run a podcast and just trying to orange pill as many people as I possibly can. I really care about this thing. I genuinely, I think it can have a very strong positive impact on the world, and I'm happy to be working in something that I believe in. So that's me.
That's awesome, man. What was your path? You mentioned you were in the military. Can you remember what the exposure was? How did you end up being a Bitcoiner, I suppose?
Yeah, so early 2017, I was really getting into libertarianism, basically just the idea of real freedom. Freedom being what you have. Freedom is basically what you have when nobody is forcing anything upon you or threatening you, right? Um, and this just affects every aspect of life. And with that, getting into the libertarian school of thought, you'd inevitably stumble upon the Austrian school of thought. And Austrian economics is essentially the exact opposite of what we are taught in university and in school, which is Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is you have a bunch of models and charts and numbers and figures, and they think that the government should have a monopoly on money and that you need to have inflation. We're literally taught in school that you need to have inflation, which is ridiculous. And Austrian economics talks a lot about the bigger picture, which is what even is economics. Economics is human beings interacting with each other. And how does that work? So Austrian economics has a very logical way of explaining true economics, and got into that and got into, okay, well, what even is money? What is money? Why do I use the US dollar? Why is the US dollar so valuable compared to other currencies? And at the end of the day, after reading this book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks all about the Federal Reserve, how it works, and you just realize the entire thing's a scam. It's just a giant scam. It makes wealthy people, I'm talking extremely wealthy people, even more wealthy. It only hurts poor people. It's a totally rigged system. And being in the military, learning those things, then learning about Bitcoin through watching libertarians, eventually it gets brought up, right? I just thought, wow, this is a perfect form of money. If you were to make money somehow, just design a currency, this would be it. I mean, it's got all the monetary properties that you need that are superior to gold. It's not ran by anyone, not controlled by any government, can't be censored, all these things, right? So that really just changed my perspective on so many things in life. But like I mentioned, one of the big impactful ones was, what is the military's relationship with central banking, and war, that relationship with central banking. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I always find it interesting, like how we come to Bitcoin. For me, I suppose it was like to get rich quick, and then you learn about the world. But I'd already understood gold and money. So then when I came to crypto for the get rich quick, and I was like, holy shit, like this is, people are calling it digital gold, and I understand gold, so yeah, I can see it is digital gold, and obviously, I think my understanding grows every year. Initially it was just to get rich quick, and then it's like, oh no, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than me. This can change the world. This is like you. This is something I'm passionate about driving forward and orange pilling people, because it's a bottoms up movement. I think the top down aren't going to advertise perfect money. It's a bottoms up movement, and I always say to people, it's all our duty. Once Bitcoin has done you good and you understand it, and it takes away your future worries or your financial worries, well, it's your duty to go and share it with your people, and share the Bitcoin love, I call it. But I want you to try and explain Bitcoin to me in the simplest language that you can. So if you've got someone who they only know the name, they know nothing else, what way would you explain it to them? Tough, I know.
Sure. So yeah, Satoshi has a quote. He said, "This thing's so hard to compare other things with, because there's nothing like it." Right. Yeah. Okay. Try to explain Bitcoin to you in a simple way. So it is decentralized digital money, and it's scarce. It only has a finite supply of 21 million coins that can ever exist, unlike any currency that we use today, fiat currency, which they have absolutely no supply limit. They can be printed endlessly, which is the reason why they lose their value so much. It is borderless. So if you look at, if you were to send money from you to me through our banks, we would have a lot of bureaucracy, paperwork. We would have to answer questions. With Bitcoin, it cannot be censored at all. So nobody can stop the transaction, because nobody is in between the transaction. Like, unlike a bank transfer where I want to send money to you, it goes from my bank to your bank to you, right? And if you look at all these other properties of money that are the most desirable, so portability, divisibility, scarcity, store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account, fungibility, all these different properties, Bitcoin has basically every single one of them. So it is essentially a perfect form of money that nobody can stop and nobody controls. It's software. Bitcoin is literally software. It's data, and it is simply taking money out of the hand of the state. So nobody controls it. No government issues it. It's just software that anybody can run on their computer. So I hope that's simple enough. I didn't want to miss anything,
I'm going to play devil's advocate here now a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you're telling me Bitcoin is so great, but last year it was nearly $70,000. Why would I buy something that goes down in value so much?
It's a fantastic question. Couple reasons. So one of them is, let's just keep in mind, right? When was this thing released? 13 years ago. It was released in 2009. As far as the code running live, or the white paper came out in 2008. That's only 13 years. And if we're talking about something becoming the reserve currency for the world, there's absolutely no way that it's gonna go from being $0 13 years ago to becoming world reserve currency without any volatility. It's completely unrealistic. The other thing is, if you look at historical prices of Bitcoin, it continues to go up past its previous all-time highs. And why is that? Okay, well, we know it's extremely scarce, right? 21 million coins that can only ever exist. We know that demand is undoubtedly growing. You look at politicians, especially in the US, you got Ted Cruz talking about it all the time from Texas, tons of politicians getting paid in it, advocating for it. You have huge corporations buying it, MicroStrategy, Tesla, Mass Mutual, which is a 170-year-old insurance company, Mercado Libre, which is like eBay for Latin America, just tons of different companies that are adopting it. So the demand is growing. And volatility is insignificant if you are keeping a long-term view. And this is the big issue, right? Because we all want to make money now. And that's why so many people go into crypto, which is gambling, and they put money in Dogecoin, because if it goes to $1, or whatever, however much it is. I don't even know. If it goes up to a certain price, right, they're going to be extremely rich. This is entirely different from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not a gamble. Bitcoin is a long-term hold. You're not going to want to sell it in the short term. It is a savings plan. It is a long-term savings plan. And the advantage of that versus crypto, everything else, is crypto, again, is a gamble. You don't know if these coins are going to exist 2 years from now or whatever. Bitcoin, it is clearly being adopted. It has first mover advantage. It takes the stress off your shoulders, really, because you don't have to worry about, okay, which coin should I put my money into and how much should I risk? It's simple. You just buy it, super easy, hold it, which is difficult oftentimes. That's the hardest part, is for people to actually hang on to it and not sell it or lose it.
That's awesome, man. And I'm gonna continue here. This is all good stuff, but I know you're well able for this. If it's a permissionless money and I can almost circumvent government control, how will they allow that to continue? Surely they can shut it down. How do you explain that to me?
Yep. That's a really common concern. And by the way, for anybody listening who, I can only say so much within the certain amount of time we have. There's a great website called endthefud.org, and it addresses all these things. Fantastic website. Yeah, so why doesn't the government just ban Bitcoin, right? Well, many different reasons as well. So I'll just start at the first one. The government can ban Bitcoin, but the question is, which government are we talking about here? Are we talking about the United States government, or are we talking about the Chinese government? Because the Chinese government has banned Bitcoin like 3,000 times at this point. And if you look at the internet, past technological huge advancement, which changed the world, what is China's relationship like with the internet? They're extremely authoritarian with the internet. You look at other countries, maybe the United States or Europe, or other countries are not going to react the same way other governments are not going to react the same way as all these other governments. There's going to be differences there. So that's one thing. Another thing is politicians are people too. So, you would think, especially as a libertarian, the government has this ability to just print endless amounts of money and pay for whatever they want with it. Why would anybody just let go of that power? It is a very important question to ask. The answer is politicians are people too. Okay, so if you think about a local politician, he wants to increase business in his area or her area, right? He wants to get a lot of votes. He's got financial incentives to actually have Bitcoin take place in their economy, right? So let's take Texas, for example. Texas has a huge oil and gas industry, as well as Oklahoma and other states in the US too, but Texas is like the mecca of Bitcoin in the US right now. And what these oil and gas companies do is they are mining Bitcoin. And they're mining Bitcoin because two reasons. One, it is inevitable for them to just waste a certain amount of gas. And what they do is called flaring. So if you drive by, if you've been by an oil mine, they have basically like a lit fire above their oil rig, and that's flaring. So from the governmental perspective, the government claims that that's greenhouse gas emissions and global warming and all that, and we're all going to die. So these companies kind of have the government step off, because what they're doing is because they are taking the energy that is used from flaring and diverting that to Bitcoin miners. Okay, so now they're not flaring, they're not releasing greenhouse gas emissions, and they're getting paid to do that. So this is a really important topic in places like Texas, and it would be political suicide for a politician in Texas to just ban Bitcoin. It'd be political suicide. So politicians have very real incentives to let Bitcoin be a thing. The other thing is that if you look at El Salvador, this is the first nation state on earth. We have two now, but this is the first government that made Bitcoin legal tender. their economy has grown quite a lot since they made it legal tender a little over a year ago. It's the first time they've had double-digit GDP in the country's history. Tourism is up by like 46%. A lot more jobs being created. Good things are happening. But that's El Salvador, right? That's a small government that wanted to try something new. It really pisses off the IMF, and that they have Bitcoin as legal tender. So yeah, I mean, I hope that you should talk about this for an hour, right? But I hope that kind of encompasses. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all good stuff, Andrew. We were chatting a little bit off air there. You were scolding me for my lack of maximalism, but explain to me.
I was not.
Possibly rightly so, but explain to me why you're Bitcoin only.
Oh man, that is a
And I know
dense question. What was that?
I know you can probably talk for hours on it, but yeah, when you're ready, explain to me why you're Bitcoin only.
Okay, I almost wanted to load up a presentation I made about 2 months ago about this very topic. I don't know if you can wait maybe a little bit for me to load this document up. Is that a possibility?
Of course it is, man. Load her up there. Guys, anyone who's listening, if you're enjoying it, hit the like button. If you have any questions, drop them in. Support the community, become part of the community, like and share and have the crack. And Andrew will be getting up the amazing document shortly.
Are we live right now?
Yeah, man.
Oh, really? We're live. That changes things. I didn't know.
We're not live. We're recording, but it will be live.
I see. Okay, very well. The first thing is Bitcoin is the most decentralized. The second is Bitcoin is immutable, therefore the most secure. The third point out of the 5 is Bitcoin has no leading figurehead. The fourth is Bitcoin's scarcity cannot be replicated. And the fifth is Bitcoin has the most dominant network effect. All right, so starting at the first one, Bitcoin is most decentralized. You have at a minimum 15,000 nodes running Bitcoin's software all around the world. And in order to kill Bitcoin, you would have to confiscate each and every single node from all those different places all over the world simultaneously in order to kill Bitcoin, right? And what is a node? A node is basically a small computer that runs Bitcoin software. It has a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. It verifies transactions. It ensures that there are still 21 million coins. That's very important for the life of the network. And that is so much larger than any other cryptocurrency that exists. Ethereum, 70% of its nodes are hosted in centralized services like AWS. So if Jeff Bezos theoretically wanted to do something nefarious against Ethereum, he could. That's a very important factor. If something is not decentralized, right? If it can actually be attacked in some way, a government can try and stop it, then what's the point of having it? You can have a cryptocurrency, right? You have tens of thousands of them, but none of them are not even remotely close to the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. That's a very important factor. All right, so the second one, Bitcoin is immutable, therefore the most secure. Bitcoin is immutable. So immutable, what does that mean? It means it can't be changed, right? So if you look at Ethereum's monetary policy versus Bitcoin's monetary policy, they look drastically different. Drastically different. I wonder if I can just share my screen here. Now you see Ethereum's, this is essentially Ethereum's monetary policy, Ethereum's historical and projected issuance rate. Let's take a look at Bitcoin's first, right? Very clear, very concise, a certain amount of coins being mined and the number of halvings. So the newly supplied Bitcoin gets cut in half every 4 years. Satoshi Nakamoto has a great quote about Bitcoin's immutability. So here's his quote. The nature of Bitcoin is such that once version 0.1 was released, the core design was set in stone for the rest of its lifetime. very clear that, if you want to have a monetary policy, right? Look at the Federal Reserve or the ECB, they're changing what they're doing every quarter. And nobody knows what's going to happen, right? Very unpredictable, creates a lot of uncertainty with the economy. Bitcoin is the exact opposite. But if you look at something like Ethereum, which people say is the number 2 to Bitcoin, I say it's the number 2 in general. Pun is intended. This is Ethereum's monetary policy. Entirely different, making changes along the way. They're going from proof of work to proof of stake, which I can go on a long rant about why proof of stake is completely ridiculous, but you get the point, right? Bitcoin is the most reliable, right? You have all these different examples of hacks happening on projects that are taking place on Ethereum. The Terra Luna incident happened. The Solana blockchain was recently halted. It's a mess out there. It is an absolute mess. And Bitcoin is all about safety, security. We're not going to move fast and break things. We're going to be very methodical about this thing because it's too important to mess up, right? Here's another hack that happened. Ethereum DeFi protocol, Beanstalk hacked for 182 million. That was back around the time I made this presentation. Next one, Bitcoin has no leading figurehead. Satoshi Nakamoto, he is the anonymous creator of Bitcoin. Nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. With a lot of these other crypto projects, you know exactly who the founders are. And if you're thinking about something being a money for everybody, it's a really good thing that there's no central representative of that money. If this thing is truly going to be decentralized and not divisive, right? It's nice to not have anybody being the designated representative of that thing. And although it is a mystery that Satoshi, nobody knows who Satoshi is, Bitcoin itself is not a mystery in any way whatsoever because it's open source code, meaning that anybody can look at the code, anybody can make a change to the code if they so wish on their version. This is the meat and potatoes of this presentation, and I'll try and condense it as much as possible here. What is TCP/IP? There is a quote from, I don't know if I have it in here. Okay, well, the creator of Gmail has a quote saying that Bitcoin may be the TCP/IP of money. And that's a really big deal. So what is TCP/IP? The TCP/IP model is the default method of data communication on the internet. So you and I, Dinny, are right now using TCP/IP to communicate to each other. Whoever's listening to this, you are listening to this over TCP/IP. And this was invented in the 1970s. Okay, so Bitcoin is often criticized by people in crypto for being too old, right? Outdated technology. This is ironic because they're using TCP/IP still, which was invented in the 70s, when they're typing that comment angrily on Twitter or something like that about Bitcoin being too slow or outdated. All right, so there is a great website or a great section of this website. It talks about the protocol wars. I can give you the link after, but essentially it talks about what the history was of the internet, what did the competition look like, and essentially, so I'll just read this quick quote from there. Everyone agreed on the goal, develop a global computer network. They did not agree on how. By the early 1980s, several different protocols competed. Sounds familiar, right? OSI, Open Systems Interconnect, backed by European telephone monopolies and most governments, was favored. Other strong competitors included two corporate networks, IBM's SNA and DEC's DECnet. The dark horse contender was the internet, defined only by a self-governing community dependent on volunteers. The internet community was nimble, able to develop in months what took the OSI community-based process years, but it scared off some potential adopters because nobody seemed, quote, in charge. Sounds familiar with Bitcoin, doesn't it? Which is entirely different from Ethereum because Ethereum has, you know who created it. It has decision makers, they tell you what's happening with Ethereum, right? They say Ethereum is moving from proof of work to proof of stake, changing the entire securing mechanism of the thing. And basically nobody gets to say, and that would never happen in Bitcoin. All right, how are Bitcoin and TCP/IP related? The internet is the network of information, while Bitcoin is the network of value. Both of them had many competitors. However, there was one winner because of the network effect. So like I mentioned to you earlier on this call, sure, TCP/IP had competitors that may have had technical advantages over what TCP/IP had, right? And what you saw was, instead of people leaving TCP/IP to go to another network for some sort of advantage, it made more sense for people to build that advancement on top of TCP/IP versus everybody leaving the network. Okay, so instead of people leaving to a different network with different properties, you can just build those properties on top of TCP/IP. So some examples of those things are SMTP, HTTP, HTTPS. All these things are built on top of TCP/IP. They're all protocols built on top of TCP/IP. Yeah, so in monetary terms, network effects are also extremely important, because money is essentially the most liquid commodity, right? Money is a medium of exchange, something that solves the problem of us having to barter, because it's something that we both mutually value and we can exchange in turn for something else of value. We can make our own coin, right? I can make Andrew coin, you can make Dinny coin, but that doesn't mean it's valuable, because it has to have a network of people who value it in the first place to be able to be using it. So I have a funny question here. Does it make sense for John to pay Sally an X coin, then for Sally to convert X coin to Y coin in order to pay Steve? Then in order for Steve to pay Patrick, he needs to convert his Y coin into Z coin. Of course, it does not make sense, because all of them are eventually going to be using one form of money. And yeah, so I point off that, and I'll try and cut myself off here, because I hope I'm not going on too long of a rant. But digital scarcity can only be held once, right? It can only be created once. There can be an infinite number of altcoins created, just like fiat currency. There can be an infinite number of fiat created. Altcoins are not scarce. There are about 12,000 to 15,000 altcoins that currently exist right now. Okay, you can make more of them. Bitcoin is scarce because it's the first mover. It has the network effect of digital scarcity, and that can't be replicated. So I hope that makes sense. I've got a lot of other stuff in here, but in the interest of time, I'll cut it off there.
This is what I do. Like you've like taken over the podcast now, and you're just giving me a presentation. That's awesome.
Dude, I care about this thing. I mean, I think there's so many logical reasons why Bitcoin maximalism just makes sense, and it's often seen as this like cult-like ideology, and Bitcoin maximalists are closed-minded, right? They only care about Bitcoin and nothing else. They don't care about innovation. But I once you do the work, once you study how Bitcoin works, you see that network effects are just an objective fact of life, and it's not closed-minded to acknowledge that fact. So yeah, hope that makes sense.
That's awesome, man. You can stop sharing your screen there if that's okay.
Awesome.
We'll get us back on there. There we go.
All right.
Tell us about Bitcoin Reserve.
Yeah, so we are a Bitcoin only brokerage. We focus on Europe, and basically we obviously have this ethos of Bitcoin only. It's a good thing to not have people distracted by buying Dogecoin or gambling or anything like that. So yeah, that's a nice thing. And we also make sure that people self-custody their coins. So if you look at other exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken or all these exchanges, Binance, once you buy the Bitcoin, they hold it for you, right? You can withdraw it to your own wallet, and that's fine, but they're going to hold the Bitcoin for you unless you do something about it. With Bitcoin Reserve, we send it directly to your wallet, and we want you to have freedom over your money, and want you to, take possession of it yourself, because you don't truly own it if somebody else is holding it for you. So yeah, Bitcoin only brokerage. We help people buy any amount of Bitcoin, and happy to be doing this and doing something that I really love.
It's awesome, man. I was going to ask you, why would people choose Bitcoin Reserve rather than Coinbase? You sort of answered it in that you guys sort of force people to learn how to self-custody, which is almost, I see the logic in it. It's cool because a lot of people are lazy, and now with the Celsius FUD, or there's no smoke without fire, or whatever way you want to put it, like my phone's hopping because people are like, I need to get it off there, I need to get it off there, and they don't know how. They don't know how to use a wallet, and they've held Bitcoin for a year, 2 years, and they have no clue how to self-custody. I think it's probably along with you. It's essential skill. You don't have to self-custody 100% of your Bitcoin, or you can, but not self-custodying 100% is, I just think that's laziness, and as you say, you don't actually own your coins.
100%. There are many examples in history that show that you want to hold your own wealth in your own possession, and you can look at so many things that have happened, right? Like Cyprus, people lost half their money in the bank just took all their money in a bail-in. You had Lebanon debt crisis, basically the same thing happened. Executive Order 6102, which in 1933 essentially had all of the Americans who had their gold held in the bank, the government confiscated all that gold. You can go on and on. There are so many different examples of people being financially censored and having their wealth taken away. And this is just a huge proposition I think Bitcoin offers, especially right now, especially when you have the Russian government getting their assets frozen overseas, or the Canadian government freezing people's bank accounts because they donated to a cause that they believe in. It is absolutely nuts that they are taking this step. And I think it's only a more positive advertisement, if you will, for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's the use case for Bitcoin. I think a lot of millionaires and billionaires all over the world took note of what happened in Canada and went, all right, so everything dollar denominated or euro denominated, I don't really own. I only own it. And then not only that, that's all okay, but the macro setup in the world is, I don't know, in my life, I'm 40, and I haven't paid attention to this stuff for 40 years, I suppose, 20 years. But there's never been a time in my life when I can remember more uncertainty in the future of, I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. And all my assets that I think are mine, we've witnessed that they're not mine, because we've seen that the Canadian dollar and that, like, you don't own that. It's permissioned money. And then there's this Bitcoin thing, which does have volatility, but the education around it's so much better. The understanding around it is so much better. And it's permissionless money that I can own and self-custody and literally protects my wealth. It's just use case. It's pushing, the world is being pushed into Bitcoin, whether they want to or not, whether they're ready or not. They're like, okay, it's financial insanity to have no Bitcoin. I need an exposure. And then whenever you get 1%, generally it just engulfs you until you're 90%, 99%, or 100%.
Starts eating up your portfolio.
Yeah, because it outperforms everything. And then I think as your education grows, so does your conviction, so does your understanding, so does your comfort. And you're like, well, why am I holding these other assets that aren't competing with Bitcoin over a 4-year period? My last question, or one of my last questions, I won't commit to my last question yet, Andrew. I'm enjoying this. Right. But how is Bitcoin going to change our world? Imagine it's in a decade's time. Like, what's different? What industries have changed, or what? Like, is Bitcoin just a savings account in our regular bank? Or I know it's really difficult, but in your head, have you thought about this at all? And anything?
Thought about it a little bit,
Yeah.
A lot, yeah. Listen, I mean, nobody really knows the future, right? So I can only speculate. I think it'll largely have a lot of good impacts on the world. Why? Because I think a lot of bad things happen when the government, but any group really, has this monopoly on money. That's a really ridiculous thing that nobody else can have before Bitcoin, right? Money itself had no competition. So with any other product, if you were to have let's say cars, if you had a monopoly on cars, they would be a low quality car because you would have no competition. You'd have horrible service because you have no incentive to do better because you're not going to lose business, right? All these same things apply to money, and money has just been absolutely horrible and ruining people's lives for the last about 1,000, well over 1,000 years, but the first fiat currency was about 1,000 years ago. So yeah, logically thinking about it, if more people continue to opt into Bitcoin just as they have been the last 13 years, it is going to allow people to work less because they don't have to constantly work more and more and more to maintain their same standard of living, because the currency that they're holding is scarce and it gains value over time, versus the currencies that we all use today. It's not scarce. They're not scarce at all. They lose value over time, and you have to continue working harder and harder. So picture people having a lot more free time, a lot more time with family, a lot more time to do the things they actually want to do in life. And that's a really beautiful thing. It's a really honorable cause, I think, a really good thing to strive for. Governments would also become significantly smaller. It just outrageously smaller than they are today. So, depending on your political preference, that's either a good or a bad thing. But I would say, objectively speaking, the last 2 years have not been that great. And I've seen a huge loss of freedom because of the size of government. So I personally would like to live more free. And, so those are some good things, right? And I think we often have a very, 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 very hopeful perspective of the future of Bitcoin. But I think one thing Americans don't really consider is, growing up in the United States, you don't really realize how fortunate you are to have the world reserve currency. And that is basically all the United States has left. The United States doesn't make anything. It used to make a lot of things, but it's really not that booming of an economy, despite what the politicians tell us. And to lose world reserve currency status, I think would really change a lot of how society functions in the United States. So I think it's a good thing, right? Because we've been very spoiled and we've taken advantage of that. And there's going to be some equalizing here. I think it's going to be a good thing in the long run, but it could be painful in the short term with the transition. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think I sort of see it as it's my mission, my duty to orange pill as many Irish people as I can, so that the transition here isn't too horrible, so that everyone doesn't get wrecked. You don't Bitcoin to go to 10 million, and for us as Bitcoiners to be really wealthy people, but you're probably going to get murdered because the rest of your country can't even afford food. That's why I think a Bitcoiner's duty is to help other people, let them have exposure to this thing. If it's going to become the world reserve currency over the period of time, well, you probably don't need to own a couple of Bitcoin. You just need to own a tiny bit of it, just to have not zero Bitcoin. And at least you've got, I think it's Greg Foss, he calls it insurance, and it just makes sense. It is just insurance. Deadly. So then, with your forecasting model, and I always ask this question just for a bit of fun, in 2030, what price do you think Bitcoin will be? You can give me a bearish and a bullish answer. Don't give me a I don't care, blah, blah, blah answer. Come on.
I appreciate that, because we do care about the price, but it depends on what time horizon we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like 10 years from now, yeah, you should care about what the price is going to be 10 years from now. Next year, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. Okay, my model. Well, is that all models will be destroyed, as Michael Saylor says. I don't go off of any models or anything like that. But it sounds like you're looking for just a concrete exact number. Am I wrong? Or
Yeah, you can give me two. You can give me your bearish and your bullish. We're not going to hold you to. We know you're not a financial advisor, nor am I. We're just two Bitcoiners having a crack.
all right. This is a tough one. All right. Let's say bearish in 10 years. So 2032.
2030.
Oh my God. I can't imagine anything less than a million by 2032.
Okay, nice.
I'll just keep it at that. I mean, let's just say right there, a million.
I don't need two goals,
um,
Dinny. I know it. It's a million.
well, let's say on the really bullish case,
Yeah.
if the US dollar really does have this hyperinflationary event, which in the United States, we're all just like, oh, that could never happen here. I mean, $1 million is going to be worth nothing. It could be worth far more than $1 million. I don't know if you know Knut Svanholm, Swedish guy. We recently had him on our podcast, and he brought up an interesting point. He said during COVID, there were I believe he said $8 trillion printed, the U.S. government, and if you do the math, that is about $21 million printed per one Bitcoin mined.
Wow.
And he says it is not far fetched to say that Bitcoin will be worth $21 million. It's likely. I mean, that's what he says. I think it's actually a logical argument, but
Yeah, like I don't think
yeah.
it's crazy because it's like in 08 we printed billions, in 20 we printed trillions, but like we've 10 years. What if we have another event where we need to print loads of money? We see the inflation we're getting now from printing the trillions, but what happens between now and 2030? If there's more financial instability, the whole system has to get bailed out, loads of new money comes in, and suddenly, like I remember when I started drinking pints of Guinness, they were like 190. Okay, now I'm paying 520 for a pint of Guinness, but in 2030 I could be paying 15 quid for a pint of Guinness. Do you know what I mean? Like the money is just going to go down. So like I don't think it's wild numbers, and I know people who might be hearing this who aren't in Bitcoin will be like, what is it, lads? Are you crazy? But to me, $1 million is pretty rational. with like two halving events, continued increased adoption, and whatever happens in the macro world and whatever they do to our currency in the meantime, and that deteriorating, it's not really pie in the sky figures, I don't think.
Yeah, not at all. Jeez. I that's a very Irish thing you just said, by the way.
We measure money in the amount of Guinness you can get for your euro.
Right. That's like the common collapsed currency right there, just like tobacco in the United States. Yeah, they actually used tobacco as money during the Revolutionary War in the U.S. Anyways, random thing. I totally agree with you. I think, and looking at Bitcoin's price history, I mean, $1 million by then it seems that it would be very conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I mean, again, here's the thing: is like, what even is $1 million worth at that time? I think a lot of people kind of forget about that. So we'll see. I totally agree with you in the sense that we have to spread this thing as much as possible to people that we know. And because that's what really makes it money, right? Is how liquid of a commodity it is, how many people are willing to accept it. So totally agree with that.
And as well as that, one other thing, which James from Bicove brought up at our Bitcoin event was no one questions money in the good times. It's like, yeah, whatever. But we're not in the good times anymore. We're in harder times. And people are starting to question the question that you and me both questioned to get to where we are today. What is money? And I remember my whole journey was my dad paid like 20 grand for his house. This is like 20 years ago. I was thinking, I'll buy a house. And they were 100 grand. And I was like, why are houses 100, Dad? And you had to pay 20 for yours. Like, what's the crack here? And my dad explained to me, he was like, see toilet paper and see that £5 note. It's like, what's the difference in them? I was like, well, that's money and that's toilet paper. But he's like, what's the difference in them? Like, really, what's the difference? I was like, but that's money and that's toilet paper. And he's like, they're both paper. There's no difference there. And that was sort of my journey it was always in my head, and it made me question money. But yeah, in the bad times, people question money. And the more people who question money, they come to Bitcoin, they come to the conclusion of Bitcoin, I think. And then they own Bitcoin, and it's just continued adoption. Before I let you go, Andrew, where can people find you?
Yeah, well, by the way, your dad seems like a really awesome person if he taught you that. Just wanted to acknowledge that. Yeah, where can people find me? Well, I have Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active. So Andrew_J_Howard. And if you want to check out Bitcoin Reserve, my full-time work, just go on bitcoinreserve.com. So those two places.
Awesome. Andrew, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Some great points, a nice presentation brought up too. I just want to thank you for your time. It's been amazing.
Yeah, no, I really had a blast talking to you, and yeah, appreciate it as well.